kare tina I tēnā koe te marae ki a waho nei rake. Ukuranga tiru kupā, kupoma, tēnā koutou te koutou kato, tūhoi te iwi, nā te raka te hapu. Ko tauranga te waikoko o tapu tuna. Manga ko hata te maunga, nā te raka ko Shane Tepau. Kia ora mai nā tātou, I'm the facilitator, my name is Shane Tepau. I know some of you were expecting Julian Wilcox. Don't be too disappointed, I'll try my best. He was going to come with me, but he was delayed by a 4-week mirror. That fella takes hours to brush his hair. So anyway, my job is to mediate. Some will say that I'm a moderate chap, so perhaps designed for it. But really what I want to do is I want to give our candidates the opportunity to have their say, and just as importantly, ask you, our people who have travelled from afar and closely, to ask any questions of those candidates. I've got some questions that I can give through our kōrero, through our debate, but feel free to ask any questions. Now, I'm notorious for making long statements and forgetting the questions. I'm sure we won't suffer from that up here, so let's, rather than perhaps making statements, let's ask some questions. What Ian has just reminded us that taking photos in this part of the whare is fine, but not for those that have gone before us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to the candidates. I'm going to give you 5 minutes each to introduce you, yourselves, your party platform. I'll give you a bit of a cough at 4, and then we'll move it on. And then if it's okay with our upu here, I'll ask a question and then open the floor and see how we go from there. Huhana, kia ora.
Kia ora no tātou katoa. He tūpoto tēnei ki te mihi atu kia tātou I te tuatahi. Me kei no Whangārei Terenga Paraoa hau, he uri no konei. Tupu mai a hau whakatangata mai ki konei, no reira tēnei rā te mihi mai ngā hapu o Whangārei. E whai whakaro anau ki whai a Leonie Maxwell I tēnei wā, ko hoki mai ia ki roto I te poho o tōna whare a Pehi Aori, te reo te iwi I tēnei ata tonu. Me ki tērā mata o tātou ko Wayne Sherrington, ki roto ngārara I tunua ina nahi, awai atu. He tini ngā mate kei wainganui a tātou, nō reira haere ngā mate haere. Hoki mai anō kia tātou ngā waihotanga I ho rātou mā, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. A mihi to PSA members, but also whānau from the rohe here that have come to take the opportunity. This might be our first candidate event for Tai Tokerau. So thank you to the PSA. And recognising my parawhau tiuriroroi Auntie Janice, who's been monitoring from afar to make sure that Mike does a good job. She sent me a message this morning, the team has the run sheet, it's all good. And I said, choice on fire, because I was like, I didn't get a pānui, has it changed venue? Engari e mihi ana ki aia. And just thinking of Janice, we worked together on the Māori Employment Action Plan through Willie Jackson and then on to Carmel Sepuloni, and appreciate her leadership in terms of Māori workers' voice and the important role of the PSA. For myself, I'm from Whangārei, I'm standing for the Green Party for the Tai Tokerau Electorate and work within hapu and iwi spaces. But I have also been an employer and a manager and have experienced the might of the PSA. Thinking of DHB, Ministry of Health Days, certainly there's a lot of flex strength within the collective voice on behalf of Māori kaimahi, but kaimahi in general within the public service, and really value that solidarity that comes from the PSA in advancing the rights of workers within the public sector. So mihi ana kia koutou. Why am I standing this time round for this seat? Nā te tono o taku tuakana a Marama. Marama Davidson approached me, it was good timing in my life, and myself being from the rohe, I've been working within iwi, Ngāti Wai Trust Board, within primary industries, Ngāti Hine Forestry Trust, aroha mai auntie, I'm just seeing some of our beneficiaries of Ngāti Hine Forestry Trust, it's a work in progress. We're getting there. But within the hapu iwi space for a while now, there's work to be done. and accepting the opportunity to put my hand up to stand for the Green Party. And why the Green Party e tātou mā as a pātai I get? Why? Well, Te Rōpū Kākāriki stands as a waka haurua. Te tiriti o Waitangi is in the Constitution. It is enshrined within the waka. And the waka haurua is tangata tiriti and tangata whenua moving together. And that's something unique I see. Because as tangata whenua, allies are important, and how we mahi together to get the job done. And I think that in the PSA you might experience that too, whereby you keep your reps and your delegates on track, and you've got your runanga and you mahi tahi on things of importance. So through Te Rōpū Kākāriki, I come with a taiao lens, I come with a tangata lens, and in particular I worry about our lands, our seas, our people, and our waterways. So just thinking of our rohe right now and the many impacts that we have environmentally, the things that have yet to be done and the things that need to be corrected structurally. Those are some of the worries that keep me awake at night, or that I get a message about or an email, whether it's Paru water out in Pipiwai, or whether it's Lake or Māpere nearly tipping over environmentally, or whether it's our babies being taken from their homes, and oranga tamariki whānau reaching out to say, can you help? Those are the things that drive me as a mother of 3 daughters, that bring me to this point in my life where I've accepted the opportunity to be a voice for Tai Tokerau. And I will be dedicated to Te Tai Tokerau. I will continue to be seen and I will listen. So those are some of the mātāpono, some of those values that are important to me. And not everybody may like me, kei te pai, but kei konei a Huhana. I'm an advocate, good and bad. Depends on the kaupapa. But excited about the announcement this morning for marine protection in Hauraki Gulf. Needed. But it needs to be done alongside tangata whenua, iwi and hapu of each kāinga and rohe. So very, very clear on the way that we need to be making decisions that give effect to te tiriti o Waitangi. And I guess that's a challenge for PSA as to how you do that, but also back on us as voices to maintain the strong position of Te Tiriti o Waitangi as our foundation. The manifesto of the Green Party is very clear. We have our rule book. It is the map for us for the next 3 years, and Te Tiriti o Waitangi is embedded in every single policy. So creating fair and equitable playing fields for all, that we can thrive as people and as whānau, no matter what our circumstances are. A universal living wage will help us all. Imagine a universal student allowance. I never had that. $55,000 worth of student loan. I paid off after 20 years. Unnecessary debt, maybe, but the Green Party has made a commitment to levelling that out, to make accessibility to life, to a base rate of pūtea in your pocket, so that all can have a chance to thrive. Yeah, and I'm close to finishing. Okay, anyhow, land back, hoki whenua mai. Just saying. Important. Let's write it. Let's put it back. Tai Tokerau. Kia ora.
Kelvin. Kia ora, Kelvin.
Tēnā tātou katoa. The photo up on the top left-hand corner, top left up there is my tūpuna whetoi Pōmare. He was the signatory of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and I referenced him in my maiden speech in Parliament. The work that he started then, I'd like to think that he signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi in the belief that he would make Aotearoa a better place for all as uri, and there's still work to be done, hence why I'd like to be the MP for Te Tai Tokerau once again. Just like to acknowledge all the PSA members in the room and also the 90,000 who are watching on the video. But that's my motivation up there, and I refer to him often, my tūpuna and the mahi he started. I'm very proud to be the first Minister for Māori Crown Relations, and the role of me as the Minister is to move all the government departments and agencies across the bridge that is Te Tiriti o Waitangi into Te Ao Māori, so that we, as Māori, can stop having to justify our Māori worldview all the time to the government agencies. This election is an election about what's at stake for Māori. Now, we've heard all the noise and the angst going on about anti-co-governance and those hui that have been held all around the place. The reason that those people are being more and more vociferous is because they're seeing the progress that this government has made over the last 6 years for Māori. The things that are at stake, and there are a number of the things on that slide there are at stake. Mana wahine claim now, so it's not just the engagement with the Minister for Workplace Relations. The Ministry of Women's Affairs has a lot to do with lifting pay rates of women and engaging with workplace relations. If there is a national/ACT government, the Ministry for Women's Affairs goes. ACT has already said that that's what's happening. Te Puni Kōkiri, the Ministry for Māori Development, goes. Te Arawhiti, the Ministry for Māori Crown Relations, goes. That kia Toipoto, closing the ethnic gender pay gap, Ministry of Ethnic Affairs goes. The Human Rights Commission goes. These are all things that the ACT Party, and because the National hasn't come out and said anything different, National and ACT, those things are all at stake. And Māori need to understand exactly what will go and what will be undone if we don't have a Labour-led government after October the 14th. So it's really important that we spread that word and spread that message, that we have to return a Labour-led government into government. What else is going to go? Fair pay agreements. Fair pay agreements are probably the best thing that's happened to workers' rights in a generation. We know that the Muldoon government dismantled, and other national-led governments since, dismantled workers' rights and unions. Fair pay agreements are the first return to some sort of, parity in bargaining, negotiating. When I look at the nurses who just the other day have accepted a claim, their pay has gone up, I think, 60% in 6 years. 60%. That's just unheard of in this day and age. The top of the scale registered nurse I think was on 66,000 in 2017, now they're on 106,000. You know, when was the last time we saw that sort of movement in pay? The social workers' pay claim. Now, I'm very proud as Minister Oranga Tamariki to have signed off that equity pay claim. So what we did, for those who don't know, is there are a number of jobs traditionally held mainly by women who are getting paid less than those jobs traditionally held by men. And so we had a look at and compared those female-dominated work areas and compared them and said, and social workers being one of them, so compared them to another male-dominated workforce and then lifted their pay to meet it. And, you know, like I say, I was glad to be the minister that was able to sign up that lot of work off. A lot of work had been done in the background. You know, I won't lay claim to all the negotiations and that occurred, but that's the sort of thing that would never ever happen unless we had a Labour-led government. It's important that people realise that, and we'll keep doing the pay parity, the pay equity. We are the party of workers, and we know that it's important that our whānau are able to pay their bills, to pay put kai on the table, clothes on their whānau's back. And that's what we do as a Labour government. It's what we've always done, putting people in houses. I just want to touch on that too, because we know that housing is a real issue. It's an issue here in Tai Tokerau. I was just talking to Ian, who was talking about the work he's doing with Ngāti Wai, helping whānau to renovate their houses. That's part of a $75 million pūtea called Whai Oranga, Ian? Yeah, Whai Kainga Whai Oranga, yeah. So that's $75 million, which is helping our people into affordable housing. And that's the sort of stuff that we've always done. Ko pautapu tāinga.
Yeah.
Tēnā no tātou katoa. Ka mihi ki te tātou nei te whare a tāhua. Ka mihi ki a tātou kuhuhi mai nei tēnā tātou. Mariameno Kapa-Kingi tōku ingoa no te aupōuri no te Whangārei, no te Tai Tokerau, e mihi atu ana ki a koutou. Mariameno is my name. It's a typical aupōuri name, and I've been an aupōuri and a Whangārei and a Māori for a while, so if I'm talking to Māori members of the PSA, this is our conversation. And grateful, I guess, to iwi engagement conversation, so hoi no, tēnā tātou. Why would I be standing for Pāti Māori or for the Tai Tokerau? It's time for me. Pērā I Huhana, an opportunity arises, you think about what kind of voice, what kind of practice, what kind of discussion you want to bring to a forum, and for me, this is my time. I've been working across the health and social sector and education for probably more than 40-something years. I know I don't look that old, but I am. I was just, in fact, funny, just catching up with one of our matua here, who was the designer and the creator with other of our kaumātua of the dynamics of whanaungatanga. Now, all of you in this room, if you're PSA people, I'd expect that you would know that and you would understand what that piece of Māori intel and framework brought to the practice of what was then known as social work, NETED. And so I am just reflecting on that, and it's still its relevance to today, and probably even in this conversation. So just want to mihi to you. So I'm standing because in the last little 3 years, though I've been in the sector, cross sectors for 40-some years, for the last 3.5 years I've been working in hapu and iwi space. So working in te aupōuri, working in Whangārei. And we've just come off the beach after harvesting a tohora over 4.5 days, with Ngāti Waifane, with Te Kaurinui and his team of 15. And what it brought back to me was the importance of using our own mātauranga Māori, returning it back into its rightful place at the hands of iwi, and at the hands of hapu, and the hands of whānau. Not at the hands of DOC, not at the hands of MPI, but our own body of people, which are whānau, hapu and iwi. 4 days of that mahi. It's the first time I'd ever been in such a space that close. And Opodi took the lead on that. It was on our doorstep, talking to our relations to the right and to the relations of our left, said, kaya mātou te tikanga, mēnā hihi na koutou ki te haere mai, tautoko me haere mai. And so we had a number of about 40 people over 4 days, hosted them at home. The reason I want to reflect these things and my response to why is because I want you to recognise that it's about practice of politics. E hara ko te kōrero noiho. So I want you to hear that in me, and the way in which I want, the voice that I want to bring is hands-on, and being in certain spaces. Hone, I saw you before, our work life in Ngāti Hene Health Trust and all of that time, bringing those types of Māori models of practice into play. If you have 9,000 Māori members, was that the number I heard? Yeah, and 90,000 in total. I would be keen to just see what the 9,000 influences inside the whole 90,000 body. And I would expect to see that it dominates in the PSA. Māori voice, Māori whakaaro, Māori intellect, Māori everything. So the pedagogy of the PSA, I would expect, should resonate and should reflect tikanga Māori, mātauranga Māori. So, and I'm sure that's the case, that's why we're here today. Homes matter, because when houses, clean, healthy homes matter, then our kids are good to, they're not sleeping in cold and damp homes. So another of our recent mahi up in in Opodi. We've got 16 new homes that we've built and bought and placed. So the 6th one, by the way, landed yesterday morning. We'll have wātea for those 6 homes on the 11th of September. Mena here ki tāre mai haere. What we know that matters, that what's important for our whānau that want to move back, want to live back in their haukainga. They want to be able to learn their own reo, they want to contribute to their marae, they want to develop their kohanga reo more and more. We have our kura a iwi in te kao. I'm talking these examples so you recognise that when I can do that in te kao, and similarly in Whangārei, I can do it anywhere that it's needed. I can run this conversation because I have a hands-on, I deliver, I can bring those things. And I'm so excited actually with what we've been able to do in the particularly last 3 years. Mokopuna Authority is a policy that you would have seen came out recently. My son and I wrote that. And we wrote that because working in DSW, which I was a PSA member by the way, sorry. Working in DSW, give me a signal, Sharon, for probably, how many years was I there? Maybe 10 in DSW. And I tell you, it was, you did your best as one of the very few Māori, but this is around Pāti at the 2 time. It was a tough time, and then it just got too brown and everyone left. People like me had to leave that institution because it just got too brown. Now is the time to not necessarily only brown it up, but brown it up is still an okay thing.
Kia ora.
Sorry, that's us. My apologies. Kia ora tātou. I'm free later.
Now, folks, Mariameno, Huhana and Kelvin are standing in the Tai Tokerau seat. Our next speaker is Gavin Benney, who is standing for New Zealand First in the seat of Whangārei.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Paraoa Waikato te whenua tupu. Ko Whangārei te kainga. Ko Gavin Benney aho. Tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all. My name is Gavin Benney. For those I don't know, I acknowledge everybody for coming today and appreciate you having me here today. I was thrown a hospital pass by Mātua Shane Jones. He said he couldn't make it today. He is a busy man, and he said, through me that, can you go along there? It won't be too hard. And so here I am. The one thing he did say to me, watch out for that Shane Tapau. He said he'll throw you some curly ones. So I'm ready for you. Just a brief history on myself. So I came to Tai Tokerau in 1983 when I joined the police. For 30 years I was in the front line of the New Zealand Police. For 22 years I was the officer in charge of the Hikarangi area. My area took over Whananaki, Whangaruru and Pipiwai. So in those 22 years I've learned a lot. Some of the things I was really proud of in my time in the police was I became a cop who wanted to lock people up. And at the start, when I was a young fella, and when I got a bit older, I started to look at the outcomes and how we could achieve better outcomes, especially for Māori youth. So that's something I was really proud of. One of the first things that I did as a police officer was I was the first in the country to introduce the Marae, a Marae-based justice system. I got in a bit of trouble for it. I did it off my own bat. Got in a bit of trouble for it, but a few years later, it was looked at a little bit more closely, and that was something I was quite proud of. For the last 6 years, I've been a member on a councillor on the Whangārei District Council. I chair the community development role, which gives me quite a wide scope. Some of the things I'm pretty proud of in that is I co-chaired the housing strategy with my friend Orangi in the corner, Orangi. So, which looks at affordable housing and in particular Kapa-Kingi housing as well. That's something I was really proud of. I was one of the leaders that set up the Tai Tokerau standing committee, and I was one of the leaders that put forward the Māori wards for the electorate. So those are some of the things I'm pretty proud of for my council. My heritage is Ngāpuhi. I'm part Ngāpuhi and part Scottish, so that means I like a beer, but I prefer it when someone else pays for it. So that's my brief heritage on that. Just why I'm standing. I'm standing as the New Zealand First candidate for Whangārei, and I just want to in particular, crime is a passion for me. I just want to share a story, and one of my last jobs in the police was young fella, and he'd grown up with my boys, and I used to take him to rugby, coached him at rugby for a long time. A kid with huge potential, Māori boy from Whangārei. I'm not going to mention his name because some people may know him, some people may not. His father had never worked, his grandfather had never worked, but this boy had huge potential. In 14 years old he was, his father grabbed him one night, says, "Come with me, boy." They broke into the store, flogged a whole heap of booze. Went home, drank it. There was whiskey, vodka and all that. Boy, father pouring it down his throat. About 2 o'clock in the morning, the boy lay at his father's feet and died. Huge potential. Sorry, I get a bit emotional when this happens. That shaped me big time as a person, and it shapes me for my mahi of what I want to achieve now. That boy never achieved his potential. The reason I do what I do, the reason I get out of bed every morning, because I want to see those kids like that achieve their potential. And that is the reason I get out of bed every morning, and that is the reason I am standing for New Zealand First in Whangārei. That pretty much covers my introduction. I really look forward to some of the questions today. I know they're going to be a little bit tricky. New Zealand First have a pretty interesting stance on some of the stuff, and I welcome the questions. But most of all, I'm really looking forward to seeing if I can play my part for the future of the rangatahi in this region. Just one other thing, on the 11th of January this year, I produced a report of my role on council in relation to youth crime. And it was not focused on the problem, it was focused on the solutions. I gave it to our two MPs. They were both said, "Wow, this is great." What's happened since that? Nothing. That has been what is forcing me to step up. You can either sit here and moan about it, or you can do something about it. I'm stepping up and I'm going to do something about it. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to start with a question, and then I'm going to hand it over to you all folks. I think it's probably a good idea, if possible, if we ask a question that all the candidates can answer rather than a specific question. And I'm going to start off with one I think of time hasn't run out. We certainly don't have much time at all. That is the climate crisis that we are currently in. We're not approaching it, in my view. We're in it, and we only have to have a look to see what happened to our whānau, our hopu and our iwi, and Te Tairāwhiti. There are marae that will not be built on the whenua. There will be people who will not be rehoused in their homes, and we saw the devastation and the closure of a main connection path in Mangamuka. So that's the sort of preamble to my question. The question is, with climate change affecting Aotearoa, will you support Te Ao Māori approach to respond to climate change, including reducing carbon emissions and supporting Marae to become an integral part of Aotearoa's emergency response network? I'll start with you, Craig, and I'll ask you please to try and keep your comments within a minute and a half. Okay.
Called me Craig a few times.
Sorry. My apologies again.
No. So climate change is something that affects us all and will continue to affect us all. And I see it all the time in council, and the talk is about climate change, but there's not a lot of action happening at the moment, which is frustrating for me in my role as council. And so absolutely we accept that climate change is an issue that we must address. So one of the things that New Zealand First did in relation to when Cyclone Gabriel, when Marae were given a civil defence emergency, that was thrown at them. And one of the things that New Zealand First is proud of is they put $100 million towards updating the infrastructure for Marae, and that assists them to become civil defence havens for when these things happen. So that's what New Zealand First has done previously. They support the Marae as being a hub of the community and a hub for civil defence emergency. And we must address climate change, and we must look at and it's got to stop talking about it. We've got to start action.
Absolutely, hell yes, is actually what I want to say to the question about climate and are we in the space as a party to do what we need to do. So this marae, just so you know, is one of, in this particular area that stood up, and we had our own hub running around out of here in that kitchen. So we had 40 matches in here, but that was only initiated, by the way, by one auntie who just booked the marae and just said, we're coming in. So came in, Korotangi and I did the first shop, we were in here, he did the first cook with a couple of others, and we stayed for those days. And then we're wānang every night with all of the whānau that usually sleep down and were flooded out from the CBD area. So it would be nuts if I said no. But this one example shouldn't be just like a unique example to Whangārei, Giampuri Great, because I want all the marae that weren't flooded out and devastated, did as we always do whenever we get a call up with Taimai Te Auntie, that they do papaku, suddenly we're feeding for 500 people. So the model is there, it's been tested thousands and thousands of times over many years. It makes complete Māori sense to have marae. In fact, it's the first hub, because here's the kicker. I drove up to the Blinken, what's the other place up, the Mackay Stadium? They had huge setup, 17 people sitting at desks all ready to go, but no one was there. 40 people were here, and everyone was in the kitchen. So you see, that's my response that's a typical Māori response, which is perfect and ready to go in a Pāti Māori world. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora. So the biggest emitters of polluters are agriculture and transport. And again, what's at stake? If there's a national government, they want more agriculture, and they don't expect agriculture to pay for their emissions, and they want more roads and more internal combustion engine vehicles. So that's what's causing it, and they want more of it. Yesterday, the government announced $2 billion investment with an organisation called BlackRock to make New Zealand 100% renewable electricity. So rather than diesel trucks and that, hydrogen, investment in hydrogen, investment in more hubs for electric vehicles, wind farms, solar. That's what we have to do. Those are the practical solutions, and a $2 billion investment with this international organisation to make this happen. That's when we're going to see some real reductions in New Zealand's emissions, and we'll see some real action. Of course, when we, as a government, put the levy on vehicles, we were ridiculed, but actually that's really what needed to happen, and what's done is pushing more and more people into buying either electric cars or into hybrid cars. Those are real practical things that governments can do to make a difference. The bottom line is we have to stop pumping so much crap into our air, our water, our rivers, our lakes and our ocean. That's when we'll start to see real changes in climate.
Thank you, Kelvin.
And that's the way this government is going.
Kia ora, mihi ana ki te kaupapa. The time is now for us to make some bold change in terms of climate change, and our Minister, James Shaw, has done his best as a minority voice in a majority government. So the way with which we go in strong is to strengthen the Green voice into our next and future government. Ultimately, we know what the problems are, but we need stronger remedies, we need stronger policies to see the reduction in all the emissions that we see within our community and within society. I think of Tai Tokerau, and we have climate change adaptation plans, we have national policy statements coming into Aotearoa, and then we've got the local plans and adaptation, and what do we do? There's so many layers of change that is required, and Te Tiriti o Waitangi is that compass. Te Tiriti o Waitangi gives the roadmap as to how we work together meaningfully to change the waka. Because Te Tiriti guides us, tangata whenua, tangata tiriti. And that hasn't been embedded there. Te ao Māori view, we should not have to stand and cry out that our reo should be heard. Marae should not go begging to civil defence to ask for kutia to be recognised as a community hub for civil defence responses. I acknowledge the work of our aunties here in Terenga Paraoa. There were a range of marae around our district that stood up, opened their doors and did the work, with or without funding. Many of us had whānau homeless or impacted, and still 6 months on, the river in Hikurangi Awa and Pipiwai still runs paru. The whānau, 80 homes, cannot drink from the awa as they have for generations. So let's not think that the storms have passed and our people are sorted. They are not. We still have chronic infrastructure issues within Whangārei District Council, as is Far North District Council. The Tūtai still went through whakapara because Hikurangi Swamp just backs up every time it floods. There are many, many issues, and if we're not bold and strong on it, then we won't be able to get the sustainable change that we really need. So at the heart of it is te tiriti. Give the old Māori voice. Let's go strong and proud. Pāti vote green. Kia ora tātou.
As I said, it's whānau. I have more questions, but I'm going to take it out to the floor and see if we have any part-time on the floor. Kia ora whaia.
I want to ask you really to be sincere about this question. We asked it in 1981, and I didn't have a passport. I didn't realise I didn't have a passport to go on to 10 to 21. So what I'm going to ask you is what our elders knew from the beginning. Take back our past. Take back our past. Take back these places that Pāti like to look and see green on them. But take them back, because that is our saving grace. All our tupunas would have told us, never build on the lowlands. All our tupunas would have told us, protect your swamplands. What did they do to Ngāwhara Tupuna Swamp? Just in that place alone, Huhana and I can go home and find a safe place, but we haven't got our tumu to live on, because that's all I was brought up on. I want you to be sincere about the truth of who Māori are. For you look at me, because you can do a lot, but you have to be brave enough to ask for it. I've always voted Labour, and not the next time.
What's the...
You know, as a Māori candidate, you're here to represent Māori. The one critical area for Māori has always been housing. The one critical area for you as a government member, a Māori government member, and has been in all time since government developed in this country, to keep our Māori on our own lands, our pastimes. Keep us in our own custom. This applies to right throughout the country.
So the question
Take
is...
us back there where we know we're safe on global warming.
So the question is in relation to Māori housing and how we can advance Māori housing interests on our own whenua. Mariameno, I'll get you to go first.
Tēnā koe, pai te pātai. If sincerity is what you're looking for, then I can assure you and I can prove to you what housing means for Māori and what our land and what our whenua and what our coast, just by some of the stories that I've shared with you this morning. But as I said, 16 homes. We've got another 20 homes coming into our area up in the Far North. That example of focusing on what whānau need when they want their own homes and their own health on their own whenua, I'm absolutely sincere and committed to us as a party, making that happen for all whānau, not just for our crew up in the Far North.
What is it? Māori housing on Māori land?
Yeah. It makes Māori sense. You know, we're forced to actually have houses somewhere else, but actually bringing 16 homes onto a piece of dirt, which people go, fuck, this is great, we don't have to live down in Auckland, we want to come home. I've done that. I'm doing that and I've done that. We've got 20 more homes. We've cleared the land up at Moikoraha. We've cleared that land. We've got 20 more homes coming up there. Our whānau, we have a register of 72 of our whānau that want to move home. So I've done it, I'm doing it, and I can continue to do it, and I can drive that debate, like just literally by my own hands. So I'm sincere, I'm good to go. Come to me.
Kelvin?
Kia ora, well, I mean, it's interesting when Mariameno talks about, all those whare going on to land, it's because the government has funded that to be able to happen. It's fine to stand here and say, I've done it with my own hands. It's actually funding that the government provides. It's like I was saying about the $75 million whai kāinga, whai oranga. That money is because the government has established these pots of pūtea and saying to hapu and to iwi to, house your whānau. So, that's the reality when people stand up and say that they're building houses on Māori land. It's because the government has actually provided the resources for that to happen and is doing what Māori are saying, trusting in them to have the solutions. So the issue also about, you raised, Lewis, about building on the swamps, that's something that we have to have a real courageous conversation about. There will be some whare, we already have the modelling. Mike Smith has the modelling that will say if it rains at a certain amount, these are the whare that are going to be at risk. And so we have to have a conversation, and councils have to have a conversation with those individual whānau to say, have you got another bit of land on your block here that might be a bit higher that will be okay? And rather than move into town, just move 30 or 40 metres sort of up onto a knoll or a hill or something. But those conversations have to happen at an individual level with each whānau. There's also the work around mitigating whole communities. So the work that was done after 2007 floods in Kaiō there, there was the NRC, Northern Regional Council, did a whole sort of plan, and even though we've had some pretty serious rain since then, Kaiō hasn't really gone under like it did at that time. So there's individual level plans, but also whole community mitigation that needs to happen.
Thank you, Kelvin. Why don't we'll come to the questions and go.
Kia ora. Mihi atu ana ki a koe, Auntie Lisa. Me tō moko puna o Ngāti Manu. Tēnei rā te mihi ki a koe, me tērā pātai. Tuatahi, I think we need to talk about the Stage 1 report of Te Paparahi o Tiraki. We have not had a response from the government on the Stage 1 report of Te Paparahi o Tiraki, which acknowledged through the Waitangi Tribunal that the tribes of Ngāpuhi have not ceded our sovereignty. It sits there unanswered. So that's a fundamental issue, along with Mātike Mai, which has yet to be implemented. These important pillars that provide the roadmap for us re-examining what our constitutional arrangements are in this country, because it's doing the right thing, as you talk about our ancestors. Further, the Green Party this time round, just recently announced our Hoki Whenua Mai policy. And so Hoki Whenua Mai is about doing the right thing. It is about seeing the pathway for whānau to receive their lands back. The ability for whānau who were locked out of the Waitangi Tribunal claims process in September 2008 to file new claims and file new evidence so that their voice can be heard. That a commission of inquiry will be established to examine every block of whenua in Aotearoa so that we understand the takings in your district, the whenua that we exist on. Whangārei tribes have less than 2% of their tribal estate within their own rohe now. We are landless. The Waitangi Tribunal has recognised that the tribes of Whangaroa, Whangārei ki Mahurangi and Mangakahia were left virtually landless by the acts and omissions of the Crown by 1860. And a lot of Whangārei was taken pre-te tiriti and found to be fraudulent. So the ability to hoki whenua mai is really important. What is the pathway? What are the roadblocks? Whether it's public works takings, perpetual leases, aharaini, but also the hoki ki te whenua that Whaia Mariameno speaks about, the pathway to return. And I acknowledge whai kāinga whai oranga, the $55 million that has been invested into Tai Tokerau. So finally whānau can start mapping that road to come home with their kāinga on their terms. So, these are some of the pillars of importance for Te Rōpū Kākāriki moving forward. Mihi to you, Auntie. Thank you for your part.
I don't think anybody here can argue or would argue against Māori housing on Māori land. And one of our housing strategy with Aotearoa that we looked at was Papa-Kingi. Why wasn't Papa-Kingi housing happening? And it was because of bureaucracy and red tape. So that's one of the things we try to clear with our housing strategy. So I stand on that record. But I differ probably a little bit from these guys in that I'm not a big fan of setting up a bureaucracy to run that thing. That for me is the wrong money. The money goes to a CEO at the top who gets $800,000 a year, and it does not trickle down to the guy on the ground. We set up a contestable fund as part of, so Kapa-Kingi Housing could apply to that fund to directly on the ground to achieve results. So I'm not a fan of creating bureaucracy. That money must go to the people on the ground, not the people at the top who come up with all these ideas and we get more bureaucrats and more red tape. So I'm not a fan of that. So completely support it, but I believe the money has to go. Get it out of bureaucracy. New Zealand First does not believe we've got way too much bureaucracy. We need to get rid of that and get the money on the ground.
Thank you. Fine, you had a question.
Kia ora. I agree with that. Sentiment in a sense, but I'm one of those landowners that 38 years ago, I was one of the first to have Kapa-Kingi in New Zealand, but out in Whangārei where I live. Now, we're the forgotten people, eh? Got all this whenua, then I have the city council, the regional council and other people telling me I'm a menace to my own self, you know, because on my property is kauri and tōtara and all, you know, all our nahi. And what really upsets me is I did that for my parents, eh? Because the house that we live in, we live out Whangārei, right on the sea. So we have the tide of creeks come up, and it's the outgoing tide. So this is it, we have to create places for our whānau. And yeah, for me, it's quite typical to say, oh yes, it's those hippies, the Hikersville, eh? Everything that goes wrong in Whangārei always comes back to my family. You know, people, I'm the one who gets run. I'm the oldest on Whangārei that has to go with my dog and my moko to open the gates or shut the gates, put the cows back in and all that. But all I'm worried about is our tupuna land, eh? Everybody's got, every man and his dog wants their piece of grass. But let us tell you that we want to build on our own family.
Thank you for sharing.
And there's only people like my brother and I. I'm the one who's flighty as a two-bob watcher. There's too much money on our brains. No. I learned from my great-grandmother and my grandmother. I have 5 generations in my house. So yes, I'm old school. And the reo was my first language. Not the second, the reo tuarua. So it was hard, eh? Because I had to teach my great-grandparents, my grandparents, how to kōrero and Pāti in the reo tuarua. So, yeah, it's hard. And I don't take any nonsense. You know, but a lot of people, what are you doing? Actually, what are you doing for us? For my family, my parents, they were all Labour, eh? Then my other grandparents, the National. Me, I just want somebody to be in there. And finally, I've got my mokopuna in there, eh? And I actually went to Tai Tokerau with her, and I actually had a green t-shirt on. All my family live overseas. Mum, you're in a green t-shirt, what's up with this? And I said, because for once, somebody's doing something for me. My cousin Winston Peters, the others, New Zealand First, yeah. Was my family that went to Tai Tokerau there. Okay, but I'm saying, do something for us, your own people who live here.
Thank you, Father.
And I take it really personal when people say, oh, those Māoris, largest, they get paid. I've never got anything for free in my life.
Thank you, Father. Thank you, Father. Thank you very much. Thank you, Father.
Take what I want.
Thank you, Father.
That's me.
Thank you, Father.
I'm the kind of person that takes what they want.
Thank you
But
very
I
much.
do work. And all this rubbish about,
Fine.
we all live here. We all want what's best for our life. That's all I'm worried about.
Thank you, Father. Thank you for sharing that part with us. I appreciate it. Thank you. Question over here. What's on?
I've got a question.
Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou, mena kore moia ki ahau, ko tūrenu tōku ingoa, te tau tōku pāpā, pau e rua te maunga, ko whai ki te roto, ko tau Māori te aua, tūmātau e ngā te whare o Tiria te Marae, o Ngāti Te Ara te Hapu, Tawa Toku Whaia, mo te tau te maunga, o Hikurangi te Aua, o tau Henare te whare, o te oro te Marae, o te oro wai te Hapu, o ngā tine te iwi. So, my question is based on, I live in Tai Tokerau, I care about Tai Tokerau, and come voting I got 2 votes. One vote's for a party vote, and the other vote is for someone to represent me, my whānau, and my hapu, my people of Tai Tokerau. We choose by voting to represent us. So on that, because I don't care what's happening down in Tai Rāwhiti, they've got their own people down there to look after them. But there will be issues that we can work collectively on, but I care about Tai Tokerau. All you need to do is take a drive. Just go take a drive, have a look at our roads, have a look at our housing, have a look at our, everything else. We're at the top of every statistic that we have in Tai Tokerau, or in Aotearoa. So my question to the candidates that are staying for the Tai Tokerau seat, and this will be for you too, Gavin, for Whangārei, is what's your party's most innovative, new or something as part of their policies that you're going to focus on that will impact me and my family? So just one, what's the best thing your party's got in your back pocket that's going to do good things for Tai Tokerau Māori?
Good question. Kelvin.
Tēnā koe, John. Look, there's no single silver bullet. That's the thing. There's a whole heap of kaupapa that our party, the Labour Party, has implemented. You just need to look at our unemployment statistics, which are the lowest they've been for a long time, despite all the issues going on.
Yeah, I'll clear my question. I'm not asking for a super bullet, for silver bullet or anything. I'm wanting to know one kaupapa, the best kaupapa that you got. I know you've got a whole range of kaupapa going on, but I want to know what's the best one you got for me and my family that you want to roll out after the next election.
That we want to
roll out.
Roll out. Sorry, I thought you said rule out. No, roll out.
Yeah, roll out.
Well, I think it's what hits people in the back pocket. Whānau need to be able to afford to live, to pay the bills, to pay the kai. So we've always, as a party, had an emphasis on making sure people have money in their back pocket, be it through lifting wages, be it like we spoke earlier, the nurses is one thing, the pay parity, the pay equity, the lifts and benefits for those who can't find work. I think, money isn't everything, but it certainly helps, and that's been our focus. But there are, we're not a one-track pony as the Labour Party. We have kaupapa across all areas, but making sure people can afford to live is one of our biggest kaupapa.
Kia ora e te kaihana Julia mo tērā pātou. E pāna ki te rōpū kākāriki. I think about that universal living wage that means so much for the everyday whanaunga. Those challenges within our home are real, and our ability for whānau to be able to put food on the table for real is important. But that's a wealth tax required to make a fairer system for Aotearoa. And we haven't seen that to date, and there's no commitment right now from a current Labour-led government to changing our tax system. Now, if we change our tax system, it will be a change for Aotearoa for good. And it will balance out the inequalities that exist and raise up all whānau so that at least we have a base income, to start from. It's the platform that will help all of us grow, whether we're students, unemployed, those on disability, those who are mamas staying at home, that ability to grow from there. It's not the silver bullet for everything, but at least it evens out and ends the inequality that exists. I mean, I've got hoki whenua mai, I've got dental, I've got rental stuff, heaps of things, but I just think for the daily Māori in Tai Tokerau, the minimum wage is not enough. And the current way that our welfare system is established is broken, and it needs full reform. And really, if we go back to the way that our dollars are used in the tax system, it will create an environment that all can thrive in Aotearoa. Kia ora.
I've touched on it before, but I think you've brought something really important to the table here. The gap between rich and poor has never been greater, and it will continue to get greater unless we do something about it. The bureaucracy, the money that we're pumping into bureaucracies, we talk about building houses, and we build these big bureaucracies. The houses don't get built. The money has to go to people on the ground, and that's the big point. If we got rid of 5,000 bureaucrats in Wellington tomorrow, you would not even know the difference. Nothing would happen that would be, other than the money could go down to that. So that's a big part of New Zealand fiscal. Bureaucracy needs to go. The Resource Management Act that has been run, the SNAs, that all these things that are looking at, that's not getting through to the people on the ground, and that's where we've got to focus.
Shane, can I
Briefly.
Yeah, look, I'd like to rebut that. Saying things like the houses aren't being built. The houses are being built at a greater rate now than they have been since the 1950s. The public houses, when we became government, there was a 1,200 public, state houses. We've now built 12,000 in the 6 years that we've been government. There's another 6,000 that are being built. To say that things aren't happening is just wrong. There's more houses, more consents being given than any time since the 1950s.
Kia ora, e hoa. You would have seen the Debbie and Rawiri running out our tax stack of policies around how we want to change GST off kai, the wealthy, how come our whānau and the not so wealthy basically have to pay this much in terms of tax, and the rich you just don't see it. You don't see it in there. So that's something I can put as a policy. But actually, this is really what I want to say. It's how we think about whānau at homes and how we understand their reality. And to apply a policy like that, what do we actually know about what's going on? What does it cost for a loaf of bread, a milk and a butter, and those things that on the table every night is a struggle for whānau to buy and to be able to feed their own kids and feed your whānau. So increasing income, making the wealth pay their proper taxes as they should, and they don't, and for years they haven't. So I think there's simple things like that. I don't think they're and everyone has talked about them. But more than that, I think it's the way in which we understand the reality of our whānau, what's going on for our whānau on a daily basis. I get to see it because of some of the groups and the sector that I work in every day. Our whānau are not able to feed their families. They are living in cars. They're living rough sleeping and all of the other language that's used for that. So I guess to answer your question, if we are actually understanding that reality more and more and being able to address that reality, and if it's about income, it's about career, it's about workforce, then those circumstances I think will help change the reality for our whānau. Yours particularly.
I just want to recognise that this is a hui called by the Public Service Association. I'm not a member of PSA. I'm a Labourite. I don't apologise for that, and by Labour right, fundamentally it's not about the party, it's about the support of working people. One thing that I've been very concerned over the last year or so is the attack on our public service. We have the best public service in the world by every measurement. You look at the corruption index, we're nowhere to be seen. You look at the per head of population in terms of the public service. Our public service does deliver. And I think we just got to be careful that we use terms like bureaucrats, when we had one of the best responses to COVID on a global scale basis, and if it wasn't for our public service and the professionalism and the mahi that they put in day out, well beyond their contracts, I think it would have been a totally different scenario. So I'm here to stick up for the public service workers.
High five.
Yes, much well.
The funding that goes towards that come from us as taxpayers, towards the medicine. Where did that money actually go, and who did it benefit? Because I've researched it quite a lot about it, and I know the World Economic Forum, Albert Buell is one of those instigators. And they collected a raft of wealth from that, which did not come back to us, only the medicines. So there's a big gap there. The World Economic Forum has a lot to do with corporate governance and control throughout the whole world. We're all aware of that. As you research, you should find it easy. And our freedom as a race, as a people, has been undermined by corporate authority outside of all governments. Labour Party is one of them. They've been taken over by World Economic Forum, BlackRock, Vanguard. Do the research on it. It's blatant. You're talking about cars, etc. And battery car wastes twice as much as a petrol car, and they wreck the roads. They cause 5 times as much damage than just building as a normal standard petrol car. That's just basic.
Matua, can I ask you to succinctly please put your kōrero into question?
So the question is this the direction we should go? Because behind companies like World Economic Forum is a direction around control and authority on a world basis, and this is affecting the whole world, not only Māori, everyone. But the question is, are we going to follow corporate authority like World Economic Forum? Are we? Because we haven't, we've been following everything but
Okay, thank you much.
control of the people to actually drive our own country.
Okay, kia ora. Thank you, Matua.
Vaccines are a lot to be answered for.
Well,
There's been thousands of people vaccine injured, and you guys all know. You don't.
Well, I don't. And I don't accept that, to be honest, Matua.
It's a good question.
You want me to give a response?
Yes, please.
All I want to do is reiterate your mihi to the public service. We hosted 2 weeks ago as Tiwi o Ngāti Wai MSD for the regional hui at Moko Marae. And having 300 of the frontline MSD staff in the whare, we had to acknowledge their work to make sure that the dollars were still paid to our whānau, that we in Hapu and Iwi still had pūtea to go out and serve our people, and ultimately during those lockdowns, or whether it's civil defence emergencies, it's through the public service that you actually enable us. There's an empowerment. So I think about our civil defence response, because Mariameno represented iwi of Tai Tokerau on the panel, on the committee, and then dropped down to us in Hapu and Iwi. We were the cogs to get the dollar out the door. The bureaucracy was not in the way, rather it was them trying to get the dollar out as swiftly as possible. So it's a mihi. I'm not going to address the COVID vax, anything like that. I'm just going to stay high level. Thank you.
Really interesting question. Anybody that saw the New Zealand First Leader, the Right Honourable Winston Peters this morning talk about the BlackRock deal, will know New Zealand First stance on that. And that is, we need to look after ourselves. We need to not look outside for people to come in and look after us. We used to do it, we need to do it again. There's one reason that outside organisations like BlackRock come in here, and that's for their own for their own shareholders to feather their own pockets. So New Zealand First is against that sort of policy. We need to look after ourselves like we used to do.
Kia ora tātou. Tautoko au kōrero Shane. Mihi atu ki te katoa, te PSA, well actually who are people who we know and love and have worked across the whole of Tai Tokerau, and no less so in the whole COVID time, so mihi atu ana kia koutou. To say that less of that would make things better, I think is naive, and certainly so following what I've just said, because there's no question what worked was the collaboration on every single level. Huhana and I, many of us on a daily basis, were on calls, countless Zooms, with at least 20 to 30 people in the room, the Kahoa groups, our regional commissioners, many others on a daily, just to make sure that at that level we were working to one plan and working together. So, and every time then what work dropped out of that, straight into the levels more and second, third, and to the PSA and all of you. So I just want to leave it to you, Shane. I think I just remember now why I know you from those days 100 years ago at DSW days. But
The glue pot.
I am. But and I am grateful, and I would do it again just like that. I would do it again just like that. And I think there is and because I think, just so you know, what was inside that was our whole whakaaro mātauranga Māori. We combined our might. Māori combined, we worked with all of our systems, all of the agencies, and we made that result a great result. So, tautoko hoki te kaupapa te rā.
Kelvin.
So my 83-year-old father is alive because of bureaucrats and the public service. You know, he has comorbidities that would probably have seen him, not survive COVID. So I'm not going to put the burden to anybody. I think that public service, and I work with them on a daily basis, and there's just a heck of a lot of really good people who are doing their best to make Aotearoa a better place. As a young principal, when I was teaching, I was always at the Ministry of Education's door, banging on it and criticising them, and then I worked for the Ministry of Education for 12 months, and I realised that there's hundreds and hundreds of people really doing the best for our people. And I take that same attitude in as, to being a minister and working with the people that I do down in Wellington, and there's just some extraordinary people. Look, of course, the opposition parties and New Zealand First, who's not in opposition at the moment, are going to criticise the $2 billion deal that was announced yesterday. I mean, 100% renewable electricity, we've just been talking about climate change and the effect it has on whānau and on flooding and on weather events, and then the government goes and does something that's going to directly address that. And it's interesting that there's criticism from some quarters. I mean, who else has got $2 billion sitting around in their back pocket? If we're saying that we should look to ourselves, or who else in New Zealand's going to stump up with $2 billion to create 100% renewable electricity? There isn't anyone sitting around. So doing deals that are going to be mutually beneficial, I see nothing wrong with it. I see 100% renewable electricity means less paru going up into the air, into our rivers, onto our land. That's the outcome that we're after.
Can I rebut that?
Yeah, sure, you can have
Just really briefly. So although BlackRock are prepared to invest $2 billion, take a close look at them, and they are investing heavily in the fossil fuels as well. They're not this clean green company that's going to do things. So we need to be really clear about what we're dealing with.
Thank you, Craig. Gavin?
I've just got a question. I am a social worker in mental health, but I'm with Allied Health. We always seem to be on the back burner, and there always seems to be nurses and doctors that always have the limelight, and us workers that are working long hours and underpaid are not getting the recognition that we need. So my question is, what would you guys do? Because we always see nurses on TV and everything, and doctors, but us that are actually the backbone of the health system is not being recognised, and we're struggling, we're losing workers and everything like that. So how can you guys do what you guys do as workers?
Look, in terms of the social workers, the equal pay claim, that's really important to lift the wages of those social workers in those 5 organisations. The idea that we're working on, not the idea, the kaupapa that we're working on now, is to make sure that all social workers are paid the same. So we all know that Oranga Tamariki social workers got a pay rise previously, but that left the other social workers down lower. So now we're wanting to create an equal field, because we do want people to be able to move from Oranga Tamariki into the community and work for our community providers. Likewise, we want people to be able to work, go from community providers into Oranga Tamariki to get to know the system. And I think that the system will be stronger if everyone has a better understanding. So
I think it's fine. I think it's not just social workers, it's everyone that's in our health, the technicians and everything like that. So not just social workers itself, but everyone that works under the health system and stuff like that.
Yeah, so fair pay agreements are part of the solution, so that whole kaupapa can negotiate together And again, like I say, that's something that is going to be gone if we don't have a Labour-led government. So, that's why it's so important. People have to realise that the decisions that we make actually do impact and affect people's lives. People need to realise that their vote does count, because if we don't have a Labour-led government, all those things will go, and you won't see the change that you're looking for.
Oh yes, I'd love to address that. Kia ora e te whānau, and acknowledging all of the allied health workers in the whare. For far too long, you have been ignored in this space, and all of the, sexy, positions get elevated around teachers, doctors, nurses. And even some of the nurses get neglected in the negotiation space, like those in residential care. They're not getting the pay parity, just saying. But let's focus on allied workers. And the way with which we need to invest in the workforce. Allied workers are often ignored for professional development, are not given the pathways as others to proceed and grow through the pay scales as well. I think that the PSA is essential in that space, but you need a government that will listen and not make it so hard. The negotiations have taken too long in many instances, and we shouldn't need to see hikoi, stop work meetings, protests taking place, because it's about valuing the workforce and the important work that we do at whatever level. Whether we're a healthcare assistant, whether we're in orthopaedics, or we're out there as a community health worker. I think of Auntie Teresa, many years of, sorry Auntie, I had to give a shout out, but many years of support within public health services, and yet it's the other parts of our sector that get elevated in the negotiation. So how do we strengthen our voice within our unions? How do the unions then take our issues to negotiations? And having a listening government is really important to level out those pay inadequate, because we're just losing kaimahi. Just go find another job elsewhere. So Te Rōpū Kākāriki absolutely supports that. It's essential that we lift all kaimahi up, no matter what part of the sector that they exist. Party vote green, kia ora.
Gavin.
Yeah, as someone who's a lot of dealings with mental health over the years, I agree with you. I'm sick of seeing our nurses, our teachers, our police move to Australia because the conditions are better, the pay is better, and we've got to lift those standards. And I know nurses have fought so hard to get a pay rise, which we all know they deserve. Nobody can argue against that. I just want to touch quickly on two policies of New Zealand First. One is that we will fully fund St John's. You might not realise St John's spend a hell of a lot of time fundraising so they can ring. Who's the first person we ring when we're in trouble? Police, ambulance. We need to fully fund them. That's a New Zealand First policy. They will be fully funded. The other one is we'll fully fund Mike King's mental health, which is an important aid. They get no funding. They just we know what great work they do, and that goes to a lot of the mental health stuff. More money has to be poured into that. So those are just two snapshots of New Zealand First policies. Thank you for that.
So I sit on the Ngāpuhi Social Services Board for my sins, not for my sins, for my expertise, hopefully. And in that conversation, the day in which the pay parity for social workers occurred, the very following day, their life changed. So yeah, I am acknowledging here when those things, when pay parity actually happens, the circumstances for whānau change overnight. So more of that, please, I think is what I want to say, more of that and driving that conversation. But there's something, then there's the social workers, but there's all this whole mātauranga Māori component, which isn't valued, which there's something about that that's missing. We can't be 9,000 members and still refer to a Pākehā pedagogy the whole time we're having the conversation. So I want to make this about that. Ted was just talking about when his time back when they walked into the prison, they had to place the word psychologist on their mouth, Malcolm and Cecilia, just to get in the prison gate to see whānau, right? That's those things, those fundamental racist practices and policy actually, they need to take a big flip, because it's the mātauranga Māori. It's all of those things that we know and value and are part of our DNA. Those are the things that will make that fundamental difference. That's my point. Kia ora tātou.
I have a question here. Tai Tokerau is a very vast electorate, goes from Kapa-Kingi right up to Terenga. How do we, given all of that, how do we have a coherent transport policy that balances people's need to get around, but also the environmental impact that transport by the very nature has? We'll start with you, please, Gavin.
By the end of this day, he's going to
I got it.
That's my one aim, to get out of here today. So that's a really good question. So New Zealand First, previously the PGF fund funded our rail, which has been underdeveloped for so long. We all know that we drive to Auckland now, or let's come from Auckland. We get to Warkworth, we get to the roundabout, and that is the barrier for us. From then on, it's like coming into a third world place. Our roads are rubbish, and we need to spend wisely on those projects, on the roading especially. So, here's a statistic: fatal motor accidents in Tai Tokerau are up 80% from last year. Fatal accidents. The police tell me that one of the reasons for that is because of the state of our roads. It's dodge a pothole. We treat it like a joke, but it is no joke to those people who have been the whānau of the fatal motor accident victims. So roading is a huge priority for anybody. And have we been taken seriously? We are a desert island in Northland. We are abandoned. Our roads are a disgrace.
Well, we're going to go.
Do you fellas, have you met Pothole Penny? Do you know this gentleman? I want to start out with that because he's Shane's boy and he's on my team and he's now on the council. And I've been farming district council. And he's great because he's like, potholes, I'm going to deal with that. I want to name Pothole Penny. So I want to start by saying we know why Mangamuka. So why do I have to drive all the way around this way now to go all the way to the car? Because Mangamuka is still closed because that's bloody intolerable. But we do tolerate those things all the time because we adjust and we adapt to the shitty scenario. So that's a big push for us to get that change and improved. You're right, when you come all the way through the Ngāti Manuhiri wind, new roads, and it's bloody great. And then we get here and then suddenly we're diverting, as I had to do last night, all the way through. So yeah, roading, of course, that's a big issue. Access to good roads is something, it's a bit of a dream for us up here, Shane, we just don't have it. We'll be pushing it hard.
Kelvin?
You know, the roads aren't great. There's a reason for that. The extreme weather events and the increase in traffic volumes. When you have more rain, more weather, then and more traffic, you're going to have more potholes. That's the reality of it. When we look at the Mangamuka Gorge, there were 15 slips. Some were under the road and some were on top. Now, how on earth any government is meant to stop a hill from sliding down onto a road, I don't know. Let's just be realistic. You know, too much traffic, the bad weather is caused by climate change, and the climate change is caused by more traffic and agriculture. There's this big whole circle that's going around. It's not just because there hasn't been as people say that there's been less investment in roads, because there's been more investment in the roads than there was under the previous national government. That's the reality. But we have more weather events. Cyclone Gabriel, it's caused huge damage, and to expect there just to be hundreds of millions of dollars to go back to fix the roads all at once, that's not realistic. It's got to be over time as things can be afforded. So, you know, there's been $44 million just announced last week to improve stretches and improve the alternative routes. $100 million is going into the Mangamuka Gorge. There's, I think, $250 million for something else. There's a lot of money going in. There's got to be more money. We're going to fix the roads, but it can't just be all at once. There's not going to be $1 billion just land on Tai Tokerau alone to fix potholes. And again, potholes because of the weather and because of the increasing traffic. Let's just be realistic and stop pretending that it's because all of a sudden there's been less investment, because there hasn't. There's been more investment in the maintenance of the roads.
Kia ora koutou, and acknowledging Tai Tokerau electorate stretches from parts of West Auckland, North Shore to Cape Terenga, I'd like to talk public transport and acknowledge the $300 million that has already been afforded to public transport to provide half-price public transport for under 24, 25 and free public transport for ages 5 to 16. That's awesome in terms of Auckland, North Shore, West Auckland. Whangārei, you're lucky to get a bus. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but it's hard to get a bus because it's not on time, it comes once an hour. And if you're in the far north, it just doesn't even happen. We don't have a public transport...
Protester buses.
Yeah, we don't have a public transport solution for Tai Tokerau rohe. And it's much needed. Let's connect Rawene to Kaikohe to Paihia. Let's get their cars off the road and let's centralise the way with which we can open up public transport for real, because we have tamariki driving around Broadwood to Kaitaia, because Mangamuka's closed, to get to their kura kaupapa Māori, the Māori medium education that's available in the far, far north. We don't have public transport solutions that are invested on in the north. I celebrate a budget announcement of more than $300 million in public transport because the rest of the country benefits, but Tai Tokerau doesn't. So my call is, let's look at Tai Tokerau solutions, let's look at Far North District Council solutions for now, because Mangamuka Gorge is closed. There is no way that workers can get from one place to another on a bus in Whangārei and be on time. And that's a jab at Northern Regional Council. If you're studying at North Tech at Dyer Street, you have to go from Smeedens Drive down to Dyer Street because Northern Regional Council has declined extending the bus route down to Dyer Street. So, you know, these are just little things that make such a difference for our people in Whangārei and the far north. So I wanted to, rather than talking potholes, because we're all experiencing it, I wanted to talk public transport because I think we're in the right direction and it's climate change funding for public transport, but it's not making an impact in the north. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
Matua. Matua, then I'll take your question.
And you may think this is semantics, however, I was at the tangi for the Matua Whāngai program of the Department of Social Welfare at Whangārei Marae back in the 80s, when the department killed it off and buried it. One of the best ever childcare programs ever taken on by any government department. They buried it. I've seen the Department of Social Welfare morph into a number of different organisations. And now that it is almost dead and buried, they've given it a Māori name, Oranga. And I cannot understand how any Māori caucus would allow such a concept to be given to a Pāti organisation. Make no bones about it, it is a Pāti organisation, even though it has a Māori name. Can I go on and also throw in into the mix Paraoa? It was, and probably should be, still the Ministry of Health. Why give it a Māori name when it's in its death throes? And I think there's no disputing that. Drying up water. Well, you know, the list goes on. However, on the flip side, there is one government department that doesn't have a Māori name. It's called the Treasury. And why it hasn't got a Māori name? Because it's probably the only government department that's doing well. Doesn't have a Māori name. Isn't that strange? My question to you candidates, which party is going to have the kaha to be able to take those Māori names off those Pākehā departments? Sure.
Well, I'll tell you what, the next the person who's next to answer the person who's next to answer a question is the Minister of Oranga Tamariki, Kelvin.
To be honest, I can't believe you're even asking this. The proliferation of Māori across Aotearoa is a good thing.
Yes.
I just think the normalising of Te Reo Māori is the right thing to do. And if that's the biggest problem, just the names of departments, then we don't have many problems. To be honest, I just can't believe that we're having this conversation that the use of Māori is a bad thing. It's not. It's a great thing, and long may it live.
Can I just say to the Minister then, the conversation is around bilingual does not make bicultural, which is something I've learned over talking to many ministers, many Crown and government agencies over the last 45 years, Kelvin. I can tell you that right here now. And I can tell you, I've met all of their CEOs over the years. Some of them can't even pronounce the Māori names that you've given to those government departments.
Do you want to respond again?
Bilingual doesn't make bicultural, but we're never going to become bicultural if we ignore Māori, push it to the side, don't value it. And the best way, one of the best ways we can show that we value Te Reo Māori is by making it just normal. And I can't believe that we're standing here having a conversation about the normalisation of Te Reo Māori 183 years after Te Treaty o Waitangi was signed.
We don't want it to be a. Please, can we just let them answer the question and maybe.
I just say that the bicultural, bilingual corridor has been going on since the birth of Huhana. And we need to understand that. And once there is a bicultural attitude by the CEOs of those departments, I'll retire.
Okay.
Kia ora, I'd love to answer that because I absolutely understand where you're coming from, Matua. So for myself, I have concerns when the reo isn't used appropriately and that it isn't pronounced genuinely or making the effort to pronounce our reo, and the appropriation of our kupu into kaupapa that aren't walking the talk. So I think that that's where you were heading with it. But we're also maturing as a country whereby we are adopting Māori concepts, we are adopting kupu Māori, and it's about how we are empowered as te iwi Māori within those spaces to give effect to the kupu, because don't take our kupu if you're not going to do the mahi. If you're going to be kainga ora but you're kainga mate, don't take the kupu, don't take our kupu. Don't use the word kaumātua if they ain't going to be able to sit on the taumata and execute a hui according to our tikanga. You know, so I absolutely hear what you're saying and value your perspective, but also I see the name changes, I see the signage that's coming out in our streets and our communities, papaioia, you know, the way that we can reflect on our original names and reclaiming those names are really important, because it's in the next generation that our country will learn and our babies are teaching us. Whether it's tū tira mai ngā iwi and they sing and they stand together as mokopuna, singing the Māori verse first for the national anthem. My generation onwards, we're strong in that space, but it's my parents and my grandparents' generation who had the reo oppressed. You know, it's not the same. So I think it's a growth in our country and a maturing, but also don't adopt it if you're not going to walk the talk. So that's the challenge for us. Kia ora.
Gavin?
Thank you, Matua. I think I've got a job for you in New Zealand first. So New Zealand First policy is that we will stop that immediately. And you're right. It's a debate we need to have, but we have that when everything is right. So our roads are a mess. Renaming Wakakotahi will not fix that. In fact, and we talk about bilingual science, and you know, whether we're a fan of that or not,
It's happening.
there are dozens of staff presently in Wakakotahi who are spending their time doing that. We want them, yes there are. Yes, we were briefed on this with council a couple of weeks ago. Dozens of staff, so we're told, who are doing that as we speak. Pardon?
Sitting there writing bilingual signs.
working on that policy. Yes, there are.
Wonderful.
Sorry, this is what Waka Kotahi tell me. If you tell me something different, that's fine, but this is what Waka Kotahi tell council as we speak. So let's get everything right. First, let's get our health system. Renaming the health system will not fix the health system. We need money, that money being put into the health system and make everything more affordable, make everything more achievable for our whānau and for everybody else. So I agree with you completely. Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Ted. I completely understand the sentiment and of when we hear our reo. I mean, it's sometimes you just know they're just murdering it. You just want to cover your ears when you hear our own language come back to us in such an abhorring way. So I get it in that regard. I also get that it's nearly a bit of a dichotomy. You're going to have to push through to tolerate a certain time, but to become part of the rejuvenation or the transformation, so that at some point these agencies, who many of us work inside or have worked inside, become the name. But that's what I want to bring it back to. So that's where mātauranga Māori, not mātauranga anyone else, anything else, is what is part of that next stage of resetting. And it's corrective action. It's all of those things that will cause agency to match what it is when our word is the word and our reo is the reo that covers them and keeps, and hopefully they'll get there. I remember Shane actually back when in Paraoa and DSW days, and he was worried there because we used the words whānau hapu and iwi inside the Children and Young Persons and Their Families Act legislation back then, because I was in the department then. And that's in Paraoa and the 13 recommendations. That just was literally dropped and ignored because it just got too brown. And so I remember the nervousness when he made that comment back then. But it is a different time. Our kohanga reo have done a huge effort to bring our things back into play and nearly place it squarely in front of us to go, remind us where you're living, remind us the official language, remind us that you're living on whenua and it's tangata whenua. So, koina.
So what I'm hearing is that when everything is perfect in Aotearoa, then we can start using te reo. No, but that's what I'm hearing.
Hey, I want to tell you people, I'm 82, don't ever fall into that trap. I can't speak the language. I was about to give it up. My knuckles are still twisted from being belted with the ruler that the teacher used and turned on the side because it was more effective in hitting us. But worst of all, they damaged one of our brothers. At a horror school, a Māori school. Don't ever do that. I heard my mother as a welfare officer cry and die from trying to be that person. She often would speak her language as a Māori to our own people and get reprimanded for it. And she was a Māori welfare officer on the first language. Don't tell me these thoughts about what we're trying to develop here today, that we shouldn't be using our language. You need to use it. That mokopuna there, going ahead, she got to where she is through the help of her grandfather, who wanted to hear her be a Māori speaker.
Thank you.
But don't ever go down that road thinking that we mustn't use our language as a first language, and I applaud you for that. That's one thing I will applaud you for. As a Labour government, as a Labour member. I hope that one was sitting there will forget her. Well, what won't forget how she was encouraged towards speaking. No matter who it was or what it was, but speaking. And that's what's got to where she is today.
Thank you.
So sure.
Thank you for sharing.
Tēnā tātou, e uri ahau no ngā hui, e ngari e tukua ki au, e roto tiwi tōku māma ngā tutu whareto. Kia ora. Arei.
Good scarf.
Ti mai kaut. He maha waku pātai roti ahau, engari me tīmatai me tēnei mo te Allied Health. Ko hau tētahi o ngā 70,000 Allied Health employees, one of 70,000. I am a team of 6 in the Tai Tokerau. We don't want to wait like kohanga 40 years for pay parity, pay equity. We want it now. We need it now. So that's one. What will you do to make this? We don't want to wait till next year. Bargaining, we're sitting on bargaining teams, bargaining to non-Māori for Māori kaupapa. And we have mātauranga Māori, but we still can't talk to our kaupapa because we have Pākehā sitting there. Not against my Pākehā relations. I'm a coloniser, my tūpuna came from England. My second kōrero is the prisons, Te Hōkairangi did nothing. And I know that because, you know, those fellas are out there still doing the same thing. The other one was, you know, kohanga, 40 years getting that money up there for our kaumaki. And I hold a tohu, so I know what I'm talking about. I'm still in kohanga, 40 years solid kaupapa Māori, but I work with Allied Health. Our staff are now having to fight to see whereabouts they are on pay parity. 40 years living as the poor cousin, which is what Allied Health is, the poor cousin. Because we are the cousins to the doctors and the nurses, but in our lot, in our whānau, we have physiotherapists, we have occupation health, we have all of those brilliant people who make it possible for somebody to have an operation. If we're not there, that house on that hill will fall down. Because, you know, the doctor isn't as important as us. We were out there on the street 7 days a week vaccinating.
That's right, yeah.
Kia ora, hola.
Rain, hail, sun, we were out there.
Sunburn.
Yeah, you know, travelling up and down the potholes, the dirt roads, chasing our people to get vaccinated. So we are the poor cousins, so what are you going to do for the poor cousins?
Hey, parity.
Yeah, what year will that come?
E mihi ana kia koe te whaia, having been a mokopuna of Te Kohanga Reo, a graduate of that space and then a chair of Kohanga Reo, where 18 years ago we were paying our kaiako $13 an hour. $13 an hour for your one kaiako at ngā taue toru Kohanga Reo and Pipiwai is outrageous. So, you know, why did it take so long? Why did it take so long for pay parity? And it's an injustice on our kohanga, that place where we grow and nurture our young ones. But then I look at allied health as the glue. So I have a teaching background, and then I moved home to Te Tai Tokerau to work for Kia ora Ngāti Wai in the Māori health provider space as a community health worker. So I came with my teaching qualifications and started working in the community. Community health workers are the bottom of the rung. You know, and yet I was used to being a teacher who had a union, and we used to, you know, do cool stuff, and you were recognised as a particular professional. But when you're coming into Māori health as well, you're even further down on the rung because you're competing against the bigger pie of pūtea that goes to mainstream. So there's a pay parity issue at kaimahi level, there's a pay parity issue in terms of kaupapa Māori and hauora Māori to DHBs and public health services, and there are many, many layers of injustice and inequity that exists. So to address those things, we need to have a strong government that listens to you and your voice, which requires a strong green voice to push the direction of our future government. A te pōti e tū mai nei. Nō reire e tātou mai, I totally recognise it because I was on the front line. I know exactly what you're talking about, and there's layers of inequity. How do we give voice to those that are the glue of our health system? When are they going to see fairness in the way that they will be paid and recognised for their skills and expertise? Pōti kākāriki, kia ora.
Kia ora. So there's a number of things you've raised, and let's start with the Kohanga Reo pay parity. So I'm the minister that made that happen. And that's what happens when you are in government and you have a vision. And I was talking to one of the kaiako at the Kohanga Reo by North Tech, and she said that her pay doubled. And I'm really proud to have been able to do that. What the reason it took so long, there's a number of reasons. One of them is that Whangārei decided that they were the ones that determined the pay of the kaiako in their own kohanga reo. And when I met with the Kohanga Reo National Trust last week and we discussed this, they said, yeah, it's what's happening now is that it's basically centrally funded. But they're still not all Kohanga Reo have opted into it, which is a surprise for me. The second issue you raised about the prisons and Hōkairangi, if you say Hōkairangi hasn't been successful, I don't know what you say to 2,000 fewer people in prison than when we became the government. There was no Māori strategy when we became the government. We started working on a Māori strategy and I said, well, no, that Māori strategy needs to become the strategy. And so Hōkairangi, the Māori strategy, is the strategy for prisons. We have Māori pathways in 3 prisons now, Hawke's Bay, up here at Northern at Ngāwha, and in Christchurch Women's. We're looking to expand that. There are a lot of things that have changed in corrections. Just to stand here and say Hōkairangi hasn't done anything is totally misleading. That said, more can be done and more will be done. In terms of the health workers, I acknowledge the fact that we have done a huge amount of work for Aotearoa and financially aren't getting that recognition. It does, and we talk about your negotiators talking to non-Māori. You know, I think that that's something that the union needs to work out, how all the negotiations occur. Because, to be honest, we have to, as ministers, we can't be involved in the negotiations. We have to step back, and it's the union and the people who do the talking that strike an agreement. So yeah, we step back, and for anyone to stand up and say, well, this is what we'll do if we're in government, actually, that's not the case. Because ministers don't do the negotiating, don't do the talking. But having said that, not just yourselves, there are others who, you know, our whole goal as a Labour government is to lift wages, to make sure that people can afford to pay their bills, to afford to put kai on the table. We acknowledge that the health system has had its challenges, and it's something that has been inherited, that's something that we you know, the ministers who have had that role are working on, but certainly we acknowledge that the pay isn't flash. I just also want to acknowledge, because I remember being in opposition, we up at Barges Park with some of the health force, and it's those people in the rest homes who at the time were getting less. I could understand how it works less than the minimum wage. That's just outrageous. I hope it's improved. I don't know exactly what the pay rates are, but you know, there's some people who are just not getting what they deserve for the mahi that many of us would not want to, you know, put our power hand to do.
I can't believe how many times I'm nodding when Kelvin's speaking. And so, but anyway, just to lighten the room, shall we? Teresa, just to your connection to Tūwharetoa, that's probably when I first met you in the Kohanga Reo then. And so reflecting on Painoa Road, and I was a social worker back then. And it was the first time I was shot at, was on Painoa Road, going to visit a family. I know. Yeah, that's true. Anyway, what it takes to be in the space of Kohanga Reo, what it takes to be in the space of all of many of the kaimahi that in this room, I get what that takes on a daily basis, and I get what it takes for you as individuals, and then for your family that you have to go home to every night, and then pour your story to, and then go get out refreshed again. So I guess what I want to show is the value, but value and not even necessarily what the income would be, but just valuing particularly the mātauranga that comes with that. So when I worked with Ngāti Hine for how many years, we used to scrap to keep our people because we couldn't afford to pay what was called Child, Youth and Family. We couldn't compete with that. We couldn't compete to keep our kaimahi inside what is essentially a kaupapa Māori service and place. So I think those are issues then, and I think they are still very much issues today, even despite some of the improvements in terms of pay parity. It'll only become real when everyone is prejudiced equally nearly by that idea. So that's just acknowledgement in terms of the achievements of ko Whangārei, what it means. What we need to do is just do more all the time, and Pāti Māori can do that. Kia ora tātou.
I just want to acknowledge what Kelvin said. It's really easy to get up here as a candidate and say and promise pay parity and all that sort of stuff, and I'm not going to stoop to that level, and he's dead right. But we must value, and we've talked about nurses, teachers, Kāingareo, our police and all that. We've got to lift the standards, we've got to lift the wages, and we've got to look after those people. We just touched briefly on the prison system, and the way to reduce the prison system is to get our kids now and to give them aspirations that education and employment is the way, and that is not happening in my mind. And that's the way we reduce our prison population, and we increase our presence that way. I just want to go just slightly off topic for a second. One of the big arguments today is taking phones off kids when they go to school. What a stupid argument that is. We need to address the high percentage of kids who are not going to school. That should be our focus, not taking phones off them. And so those are the things that we need to focus on, the things that matter, and as our teachers, our nurses, and getting our kids the pathway to employment and education instead of crime and gangs. Thank you.
Now, Whānau, I've noticed, I see that we've been here about 2 hours, all right? What I was going to do is take one more question from the floor, actually 2 more, because I see 2 hands up, and then I'll get our candidates to sort of do a 2-minute summary, then we can finish the formal part of our hui and have a bit of a mix and mingle. Okay, does that sound good? Okay, so I'll take 2 questions, one from the back and then one over here. Okay.
Kia ora tātou katoa, ko Lyndon tuku ingoa. Kia ora. PSA member and delegates, also her kind it's no secret our incarceration numbers of Māori are high. And I just have a very simple question. Not to point act out, but act wants to add being in a gag for a defendant as an aggravated feature in sentencing. My question is, how is that helpful to our people knowing that many of our people are in gangs?
Okay, I think a question deserves a quick answer. Gavin?
Quick answer? Pretty much just what I said. We've got to look at the drivers of crime, which is unemployment, poverty, those things we need to do. Our kids, give them the pathway, that gangs are not the pathway, that employment and education is, and that is the focus for New Zealand First.
Mokopuna Māori are exactly what I'm saying they are. They're mokopuna and they're Māori. So you restore those things that are Māori in our mokopuna, that's what brings them home. The circumstance of work and jobs and career and so on, that's a tool. But who you are, once you know who you are, then you're good to go. You're wired in your own language, you're wired in the things that you were born to naturally. So, kia ora, that's the beginnings of the remedy. It's not necessarily putting them off to any other place or reality. It is who they are first, then they're wired for what it is that they want to choose from that point on.
What we need is a whole system approach. It's not an either or. It's not, do stuff in education or do stuff in prisons. And everything that our government has done has been to try and support tamariki from the time they're born through a number of pūtea for new parents and that, through to kai in schools, through to all sorts. The reduction in the prison population hasn't just come about by letting people out. Judges decide who goes into prison and who doesn't. But corrections has done things such as provide housing. They're not a housing provider, but if a judge has an option of, say, bailing a person into the community, and the only thing missing is a safe place to live, corrections is now providing homes. They're helping people fill out their bail applications. They're helping, even if it's reading their bail application forms to them. It's a whole heap of things that corrections is doing, but it's not just about corrections. It's about the whole system supporting people, making sure people have money in order to thrive as whānau, making sure people have kai, making sure people have the health support, all of those things. It's a whole system approach, and that's what our government's been trying to do.
Tēnā koe te tungane Lyndon. I'd like to recognise the fact that system change is required, and having spent a decade in Māori public health, the determinants of health and wellbeing is what needs structural fix. But I'd like to also thank Greg Davis, Kelvin's brother, for his leadership in the courts. The substantial change in the way with which we have mokopuna Māori come in here every month with Greg through the Tai Tamariki courts, supported by Julian, who was here from Oranga Tamariki, to have their cases heard in a cultural environment supported by elders of our tribes of Whangārei. That's a massive shift in terms of the way with which a kaupapa Māori approach to addressing the harm that these young people may have caused, and look to redress and provide a space where they can be heard, and the many perspectives in the health and wellbeing of that young person is put at the centre. Te ao marama courts are coming. Greg Davis again with Judge Taumoni have been leading a conversation across Tai Tokerau, started in Kaitaia, Kaikohe, Whangārei and Dargaville, whereby we will take a different approach in terms of crime and hearing of cases within our court system. So I do agree, it is a systems approach, and we do have small incremental changes happening, but that requires Māori leadership in these spaces. And that's because we do have Māori leadership there. But will it be sustainable if those Māori leaders aren't there? That's probably a systems question. We shouldn't need to be embedding ourselves in every space, because if we get it right at the top and the kaupapa is set, then it's sustainable. It doesn't matter whether it's a Māori or a Pākehā, you just commit to the kaupapa and drive it. But I just wanted to recognise Uncle Greg for his work, because it's really courageous, and I appreciate him trailblazing for the North. Kia ora.
Kia ora, I'm Oriel. I work in mental health, and I work in an inpatient unit. And my question is, I've worked there for 8 years, and from day one I've seen violence towards staff and trying to improve a safer workplace to work in. That's why I became a delegate in health and safety group. And my question is, we're a 29-bed funded unit, and we're getting people from prison, forensics, coming bailed into our unit when we have no beds to put, and we're putting people sometimes in a whānau room on a mattress on the floor because they have to come in, they're meant to be unwell. It's like, where is the money that could come into big, we've had to move our youth to Auckland because we don't have funding to bring our children in mental health here, and it was about keeping the whānau here that are travelling from Kaitaia to come to our inpatient unit. Now they've got to travel to Auckland to be down there. We don't have enough beds, so we're talking about funding, we're talking about money for this. But in the 8 years I've been in there, I see if the conditions of our work deteriorate. I see unsafe staffing. We talk about pay equity and all that. Money's not going to fix the community in a whole on the mental health issues. It's like no one wants to talk about suicide. No one wants to. But we're not addressing the funding. It's like you can find a solution, but it's like how are we going to house them? 29 beds for all of Tai Tokerau. Are you joking me? We've got residential homes that we've seen some of the places that we have to send our clients to because they've got nowhere to go, so we'll send to respite. And then gradually, just like, I want to let my dog sleep there, but we're sending our clients there because there's nowhere else to go. Who wants to take these guys in a Kamo place, a caravan park, when they're mental health? my question is, where is the funding that you can put into mental health to improve our whānau community?
Let's start with Mariameno and we'll go out.
I can relate to the discussion in 2012, the suicide spate that occurred in Whangārei and the process and the crew and the team that came together to do what we could do. After, and again, those things are still the pain and the ramifications of that still exist today with our whānau. And I still work in that space, after hours, I guess is the best thing to say about that. What we discovered then was for the youth particularly, and you'll remember that because it was very much our youth at that time, is having youth come together to design their own plan of action, that they became peer support with the clinical wraparound and provided one of the most dynamic ideas of how to respond to youth that were in that space. And ironically, using tools like Facebook and using their own mode of modelling to relate to other young people that were in that space. And of course, it's moved on. We've got the roles of Tai Tokerau, which you all know, which Korotangi was in for 2 years up at the hospital. So to the 29 beds, that's a bizarre and ridiculous situation, and I would do everything I can to make that change. I can't say how many beds, you'd probably say it's 65 now. And in fact, it's not just in Whangārei. We need some in fact, you need some in Kaio, you'll need some up in Kaitaia, and you might even need 1 or 2 up at Tangoake in Te Kā. And I can only talk like it because I know, because that's where I work. And I understand those roads, I understand where our whānau are suffering, but I also understand the solutions. That's really what I'm saying. The solutions are just as much in the minds of our whānau themselves. And they'll tell me that every time I go to a Marae meeting, or every time I go to an AGM, and they're just punishing us for Mary, you're not doing enough, you should do more here. So I guess my message to you is, I get that scenario, I've worked in that scenario, I understand it, and we will fight to make those differences so that our whānau don't have to go to where you think you wouldn't even put your dog.
That's a really good question. Of the 8,500 people in prison now, 90% have had a mental health or drug and alcohol issue in their lives. A lot of people are committing crime because they are unwell. And the worst place to send them is to prison. Unfortunately, again, judges make those decisions, make those calls. We're building a new prison in Waikeria. There's going to be 100 mental health beds, which will provide the best mental health support probably in the Southern Hemisphere once it's all complete. It's a pity that people have to go to prison to access that help. And that is one of my visions, that we have that intensive mental health wraparound service, which has been developed by what was Waikato THP at the time, Corrections and Iwi, the Maniapoto and Ngāti Raukawa for that area. And I believe that that's what we need around the country, especially that acute mental health support. But we have so many young people who have neurodiversity, ADHD, fetal alcohol. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. That's also been, I guess, aggravated through social media, the online bullying and all that sort of stuff, the trauma, traumatic brain injuries through assaults. So, it will create accidents, assaults, sports injuries and things like that. So it is a very, very complex area. And again, we did put a stack of money when we first became government. I'm not sure how it's all filtered down or where it's filtered down to. But I agree that I agree with Mariameno that we do need sort of like smaller outposts, if you can call it that, in specific communities. So that 29 here, you do need 2 or 3 all around Tai Tokerau in various communities. But then we need the staff with those skills in order to be able to deal with it. So I guess it is complex, and we know that there is a shortage of people who work in your area. And like I say, you do work that the rest of us wouldn't consider doing. So I mihi to you for that.
Kia ora te whai oreo, and thank you for sharing that. I was just reflecting as a hapu member on the redevelopment that's planned for Whangārei Hospital. So $1 billion will be invested into a rebuild of Whangārei Hospital to serve, over 200,000 Northland residents into the future. That's a massive opportunity for us. And when I was sitting in on the meeting talking about the design and the look of it, I was hearing about the maternity ward, having babies. I wanted to have my babies here. Please jazz it up a bit. Also about child health and surgical, the new 190 beds, but I didn't delve into the mental health unit. So you've actually prompted me to now go in with that lens to ask, in this $1 billion spend on our new hospital, what is the investment in tūmanako, in our acute inpatient unit? And so we'll get the bricks and mortar, hopefully, that will provide the safe space for you to work, but for our whānau to know that those whaiora who need that acute support will have a bed to sleep in and not a mattress in the whānau room. And I'm very mindful because my cousins are in the mental health area as well, inpatient as well as community health. But certainly youth health is a worry because both community and acute are lacking in Tai Tokerau, and having been a parent that has tried to traverse connecting the system and supporting whānau in that space, we're short on workforce in the health system generally. And so when we have a shortage, you have case managers and nurses and nurse practitioners with huge workloads trying to find a social worker. So there's systemic issues there, but I know that a bricks and mortar approach and solution could be there. I give an undertaking that I'm going to go and ask questions now around, is there going to be more than 29 beds in inpatient, but also what's the investment into community services, and Te Whatu Ora should be looking at that. That's a systems issue, and Nick Chamberlain is the National Director of Public Health. We all know Nick, and he hasn't changed his phone number. Kia ora.
Gavin.
For someone in my 30 years in the police, I saw the mental health system struggle that whole time, and we struggle with it, and it is still struggling. I've had a stepson in Tūmanako, and I used to leave there in tears every time I went and saw him. It is so frustrating. And it is a really complex issue, and I'm not going to sit here and say we promise you the world for this, but it is a real passion of mine to look at that sort of stuff. And I think one of the things we need to look at is, and I'm not talking all mental health, I'm talking some of the mental health issues, the causes of them. Kelvin mentioned fetal alcohol syndrome, and that's a major cause. We need to address that. We need to start at the bottom and work up. The next lot of kids are going to be our meth babies. They are going to be substantially worse than the kids now. We need to address that, and no one is. We need to make sure, like all our social agencies, work together.
It's the biggest problem you've got.
Fetal alcohol, yeah.
In our community.
Absolutely, and as I say, the next one are the meth kids who are going to be worse. So I agree with you completely, and it's a real focus of mine and a real passion.
Thank you. Kia ora to our candidates. Thank you very much for the awesome questions and the feedback. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask all of the candidates to do a 2-minute summary and a very simple question. Why should I vote for you? Mariameno.
Oh, right. Because I can take a question first. I'm a typical Tai Tokerau girl grown up and understand what it is to get through a whole lot of difficulties and still stay in the fight. I'm one of 10 siblings and 2 beloved parents who I buried back up in Te Kao and Kyle. I'm the mother of 4 children. 3 of them were born on the one day. They are 27 now, and our girl is 21, and she is the boss, just like me. I've worked in the sector across health sector, social sector, justice sector. I've never been satisfied with what it is that we need as Māori, because I've always had to convert myself into another kind of creature to get through. I want a system that doesn't do that it honours Māori in our Māori skin and in our Māori reo and in our mātauranga Māori without compromise. So I'm not, when people say, well, you know, what works for Māori works for everyone, I don't care. What works for Māori simply works for Māori. If it happens to work for everyone else, ka pai tēnā. But that's not actually my priority, and I don't want to be distracted, nor do I want to water down what matters most. Because we are, unfortunately, on our own whenua, we are devastated the most by some of the worst embedded racism in our country. So why would I want to do that? Why would I want to tolerate that? So I'm not tolerating it. That's why I'm standing in the Pāti Māori to do my utmost to make the world more like us. So, koina kōrero, me hea tu ora ki a tātou. Me hea tu ki tēnei wā tātou nei whanaunga katu. Kia ora tātou.
So I'm asking for both your candidate vote for me, Kelvin Davis, MP to be MP for Tai Tokerau, as well as the party vote. And I started off by saying, because there's so much at stake, and I'll end by saying there is so much at stake. All the pay increases that have happened over the last 6 years, all the kaupapa Māori that have been implemented, initiated. You know, it was mentioned about the work my brother's doing in the ports, and Te Ao Marama kaupapa that Greg and Hemi Taumanu are doing. You know, that's actually a form of co-governance, to be honest. That's Māori making decisions for Māori. Even though it is in the total Pākehā system, it is still Māori making decisions for Māori. All of that is going to be gone. That ability. You know, us coming up with the solutions for our own people. You know, when we look at Te Ako Whai Order, the Māori Health Authority, it's going to be gone. You know, this is what's at stake. People have to realise that we are, you know,
of hospitals that you don't see. Hospitals aren't just surgeons, doctors, nurses. There's a whole lot more that do this work, and we're doing a bit of work to up that campaign on there. And lastly, to anyone in government in the future, whenever you get something across your cabinet table that mentions the public service or workers in the public service, please sign those documents off. It's often around paying their claims, things like that. Anything you can do to expedite those claims would really help.
Kia ora mai ngā tātou. First of all, I want to thank the PSA for organising this event. They're holding, or already have held, hui in each of the Māori electorates. I think I'm facilitating another 3, and I'm looking forward to that. And secondly, I want to thank our candidates that have come today. You know, it's not an easy job. What I enjoyed about today is, by and large, the core kaupapa we agreed upon. It's the delivery we have some disagreement on, but our direction is unified. And I think that's what sets us aside from the rest of the general sort of population in terms of Te Ao Māori. So thank you very much for our candidates, and thank you all for coming along today. I'm going to ask Matu John, as I understand it, to finish our hui today. And then for those who want, we can have a cup of tea and something to eat before we head back to our kainga. Kia ora mai ngā tātou.
Kia ora, Shane. Look, I just want to thank you for convening today, for leading the kaupapa and leading our kōrero all day. So thank you for your leadership.
My friend, just want a special thanks to our kaimani too.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you for reminding me. I want to thank the candidates that are going forward this year. On the 14th of October, we want to wish you all the best. We want to wish you in your perceptions and your kōrero this day, and what you hope for New Zealand and for Aotearoa, and particularly what you've expressed today for Māori. Gavin, e te rangatira e Kelvin, ko roa koe e mahi ana tēnei mahi, nō reira tēnei te tino mihi kia koe, e tuana e roto tēnei i tūranga. Puta noa i te motu, nō reira tēnā koe. E te kōtiro e Huhana, wa hoki ngā mahara ki tō matua, e kai ako hoki, i roto otara, timatatanga o tātou katoa, o tātou rā, o te nuinga o tātou o te taitoga, o reira I mihi ana kia koe tūnei. So all the best, and I know that we will be watching with anxiety and hoping that the outcome is what everyone here wants. Ko reira ngā manaakitanga, runga I a koutou, and haina here runga te rangi Māori, me ngā hakapono e waiho nei o tātou mātua he nui a tātou. E runga tēnā e uri noa te whare, e rauranga tira mākoutou, e maranga tira e noa noa nei. E ngā whaia koutou, ngā tūra o a tātou, o tātou hapu, o tātou iu, o te haukai. Tēnei te mihi a koutou, e hara mai nei te tautoko, te rā, hei kite hei rongo ki o tātou rangatira e kororo nei. O rura kia koutou te mana, hei pōti, hoi ngā mea tika hei moi a tātou. O rura e runga tēnā, ngā manaki tanga kia koutou, e noho mai nei i taukai, a roto o tātou takiwā, puto noa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Tātou oia tātou.
Amen.